Since I spend much of my life researching the evolution of the life sciences industry, I'm often asked for my opinion on current developments in the sector. And since Adulhelm's recent approval for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease, I've lost count of the number of times that I've been asked, will it succeed? I'm asked both by those with an interest in that vast disease area and those who see Adulhelm as a bellwether for their own different markets. There are, of course, any number of people, analysts, investors and others speculating on the answer to that question. At the same time, many are worried about the regulatory and economic implications of the FDA's decision. On Twitter, the subject has even eclipsed COVID for a little while. But I'm a scientist, and when I'm asked questions like, will Adulhelm succeed, I'm immediately reminded of Claude Lévi-Strauss, the French philosopher. He said that the scientist is not the person who gives the right answers, they are the one who asks the right questions. Now, this is really good advice, so if you can bear with me for a moment, I'll get to the practical, real-world points that it leads to. You see, nobody really knows whether or not Adulhelm will succeed commercially for Biogen and Eisai. But it is a very important, unanswered question. And it's important not only for those two companies, but also for the other firms that might seek to emulate them. The question is also being asked by healthcare systems that face the risk of being overwhelmed by expensive expectations for desperate patients and their families. But simply being an important, unanswered question doesn't make it a good question. As Lévi-Strauss was trying to get across, a really good question doesn't only elicit the required answer, it also helps us to get to that answer by directing thought processes. So, for example, I learned that it's better not to ask my middle daughter, are you revising for your exam? And I learned instead to ask her, how do you plan to fit in revision around all of your sport and social activities? Not only would the answer to that question be more useful, but the question wording itself prompts a more careful, thoughtful process in a way that I tried to do with my teenager. I've seen very little written that tries to answer this longer, more useful question, but the ingredients of the answer are already in plain sight. Even the most optimistic reading of the data suggests that Adulhelm is not going to be able to make the wide, strong, irrefutable claims to efficacy that would guarantee it commercial success. And the controversy over what happened inside the FDA will also cast a long shadow over the product's reputation. Biogel's ambitious pricing decisions, when you cross-multiply them by the disease prevalence, also imply that widespread usage is financially impossible. Even in the USA, with all its market exceptionality, payers are coalescing around not providing coverage for the drug. Eisai's final report on Adulhelm was exceptionally critical. Now, add all of these factors up, and these signals suggest that Adulhelm's future is a commercial failure. But set against this are some countervailing positive factors. There seems little doubt that, such is the huge unmet need, some people will pay almost anything for merely the hope of slower disease progression. Phase 4 studies, of course, will be aimed at encouraging that hope, and the complexities of the US healthcare plans offer many little niches that might be exploited. The political power of the elderly and their children makes Alzheimer's care very hard to refuse. And the packaging of Adulhelm, not as a product but as a process of diagnosis and monitoring and treatment, moves away from simple price comparisons. And of course, the huge wealth inequalities in Western societies, with many potential patients living in large, realisable assets, also point to a large possible self-pay market. Taken together, these positive factors counterbalance the negatives about efficacy and cost. Given this ambiguous set of facts, Biogen and Eisai have chosen to follow the market signals and to go to the market with Adulhelm. But what happens next is essentially an evolutionary question about fit with the market. So Strauss's directions lead us, via the facts that are already apparent, to two possible futures for Adulhelm. In one future, the product runs the gauntlet of rational assessment and value-based pricing decisions. In those circumstances, its future looks dim. But in another future, An Adulhelm-centered disease management process is subjectively valued by wealthy, frightened patients and by their families and governments who seek their votes. And those governments already have a track record of doing what's expedient, even if they call it following the science. For both patients and government payers, the real-world comparator is the distress and the cost of caring for untreated Alzheimer's patients. So some at least will choose the hope that is offered by Adulhelm. Which scenario, rational rejection or subjective hope, will come to pass depends upon how clever Biogen and Eisai are at adapting their business models to fit a future of rich, hopeful and empowered patients. Once again, Darwin's explanation of biological complexity, evolutionary theory, also addresses the most difficult questions facing our own business.